China, Brazil, India, Mexico and Canada, have you heard of them? Charge us tremendously higher tariffs than we charge them.
In a dramatic turn of events that could reshape the pillars of global finance, whispers of a seismic shift are making rounds. At the heart of this storm is a bold maneuver by the BRICS nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, hinting at a groundbreaking development that could diminish the towering dominance of the US dollar. Are we on the brink of witnessing a monumental economic revolution that could destabilize the long-standing supremacy of the dollar? Dive into the undercurrents of this emerging narrative, where the echoes of change are louder than ever, challenging the status quo and potentially altering the landscape of global economic power. Stay tuned as we explore the depths of this development without spilling the secrets just yet. Global economic shifts and the US dollar. The ongoing global economic shifts significantly impact the reliance on the US dollar, particularly highlighted by reactions to US sanctions and asset seizures. Countries like China and Russia, part of the BRICS group, are increasingly cautious about holding US dollar assets following the US's unilateral actions to freeze Russian assets to fund Ukrainian support. This skepticism towards the US dollar is intensified by the fear that their assets might similarly be targeted, thus encouraging a move away from dollar-denominated assets like US treasuries, which have traditionally been a global standard. From China's perspective, the incentives to continue lending money to the US government are diminishing.
China has responded to Donald Trump's decision to put new tariffs on trade between the two nations.
The US uses these funds in ways that could potentially harm China's own economic interests, especially in light of the trade wars and tariffs imposed by the US administration. The fiscal actions taken by the US, perceived as aggressive or unfair by other nations, contribute to the erosion of trust and reliability in the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. In recent times, this has also led many countries to pursue a decrease in dollar holdings, while exploring alternative currencies for trade. The BRICS nations, for example, have been talking about possibly developing a currency that will be backed by gold, which they will use to further reduce their dependence on the US dollar. This gives an image of a significant shift in the power dynamics of the global economy, where a collective bump off of the US dollar may destabilize that currency's standing as the global reserve currency. The larger picture, however, has far-reaching consequences. As countries such as China reduce their dependence on the dollar, they are also asserting their economic sovereignty by requiring their commercial trade to be denominated in their own national currencies. This is also a trend away from the dollar in international trade transactions. It points toward a more fundamental, structural shift to an increasingly multipolar economic world order, one in which the hegemony of the dollar will increasingly be challenged, and which will probably lead to substantial changes in global economic policies and practice. With the world pivoting from dollar reliance, we edge closer to uncovering how these financial undercurrents fuel broader global trade battles. China's response to US tariffs. In a robust move to assert its sovereignty and respond to international pressures, China has implemented a comprehensive set of regulations designed to counteract foreign sanctions. These regulations are an extension of China's anti-foreign sanctions law, initially passed in 2021, and offer a systematic approach to identifying and penalizing foreign entities that partake in or support actions deemed discriminatory against Chinese citizens or organizations. Under these new rules, individuals or entities could find themselves facing severe restrictions, including asset freezes, expulsion, or entry bans into China. Premier Li Qiang highlighted the necessity of these regulations at a conference, emphasizing China's commitment to globalization and multilateral cooperation as opposed to unilateralism and protectionism. This stance comes amid escalating global instability and uncertainty, which Li attributes to the protectionist measures and aggressive trade policies adopted by countries like the United States. Recent US actions, including a 20% tariff on Chinese goods, have only intensified these tensions, prompting China to refine and enforce its legal tools to protect its economic interests. The specified sectors impacted by these regulations span a wide range, from education and culture to health and sports. This broad scope signifies China's intent to cover all bases where foreign sanctions could potentially harm its socio-economic landscape. The Chinese government now holds the authority to severely restrict foreign entities' operations within these sectors, which could include banning their involvement in import-export activities or denying transactions with Chinese businesses and individuals. Moreover, these laws allow for a long response against what China perceives as violations of its developmental rights by foreign powers. The anti-sanctions law and the sectors identified in the new regulations signal China's willingness to use legal means to retaliate against foreign sanctions and set out a legal framework for its countermeasures. The enforcement of these regulations is playing out in a heightened atmosphere of trade and economic conflicts with the United States.
I always say tariffs is the most beautiful word to me indeed.
Where each country has imposed consequential tariffs and other trade barriers upon the other. This economic brinkmanship not only harms bilateral relations, but has ramifications for the composure of global trade and supply chains, thereby triggering a tipping heralding a new pattern for countries' economic engagement. In synopsis, China's updated regulatory framework for responding to foreign sanctions is yet another major step in the broader scheme of things to protect its national interests, as well as assert its position on the global arena. Such measures stand as a testimony toward further proof of China's strategic tilt toward a more aggressive global economic policy, whereby it is indicating that it will play an active role in countering any foreign policy infringing upon its sovereignty or economic stability. This is of capital importance to international businesses and, of course, policymakers. It provides a salient demonstration of the growing difficulty of making sense of global economic relations amid increasing geopolitical tensions. Understanding tariffs and trade wars. Understanding tariffs and trade wars is crucial in analyzing the complex dynamics of international economics. A tariff is essentially a tax imposed on imported goods, which, contrary to popular belief, is often paid by the importer rather than the exporter. This cost is typically passed down to consumers, resulting in higher prices for domestic buyers. Many Americans believe that tariffs are a tool for punishing foreign economies like China, without realizing that these costs are ultimately borne by themselves through increased prices on goods like Nike shoes, which become more expensive due to these imposed tariffs. The ongoing trade war between the US and China has exacerbated tensions and led to a tit-for-tat tariff imposition, where both nations have levied additional charges on each other's goods. This economic battle stems from deeper issues of trade imbalances and concerns over technological transfers and intellectual property rights. The trade war escalates with Trump's administration aggressively implementing tariffs that not only affect Chinese goods, but also disrupt global supply chains, thereby impacting global trade practices and economic relationships. The emerging consequences of these tariffs and trade wars beyond the US and China economies have become obvious ingress in the inflations experienced in nations that make their goods pricier for the average consumer. Even retaliation from trading partners sometimes adds on to protectionist policies in order to establish a cycle that features economic contending in those two nations, thereby bringing discomfort into global economic growth. These tariffs are not good in the long run, since in the end they are mainly injurious to the very consumers whom they intend to protect. Imitations and trade wars bear on global economic stability, which can alter the distributions of powers globally. Prolonged disputes now make countries realize the possibility of looking for other trade sources rather than the original ones used in trade negotiations, therefore altering the flow and patterns in international trade. This establishes the ground for the truly vast understanding that an economist and politician should have about the global impact of tariffs and trade warfare. An article from Industry Week gives great insight into what is going on within the premise of such companies as Warwood Tool and Hardhead Veterans in the context of these turbulent tides. For example, Chris Azure of Warwood Tool, speaking to the article by Industry Week, said that "We like to pride ourselves in that our tools literally helped build the infrastructure of the country. adding that he hopes that the new tariffs should be very good for us, emphasizing the complex interplay of economic policies and their real consequences on American manufacturing sectors. As global trade wears thin, these great nations under the BRICS logo will not be willing to sit idle. They are going to put their heads together to revolutionize the conditions under which the current global finance power relations thrive. BRICS and the future of global currency. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, are not only key players in the global economy, but are also actively working towards restructuring the financial architecture that currently dominates international trade. As reported by Melissa Pistilli, these nations are considering a radical shift by potentially introducing a new currency known as the unit, backed by a basket of their currencies and possibly gold. This development was discussed extensively at the 2024 BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia, underscoring their intent to diminish the overwhelming dominance of the US dollar, which currently facilitates nearly 90% of global currency trading.
Attended by the leaders of China, India, Turkey, and Iran, among others.
The introduction of a BRICS-backed currency could represent a pivotal shift towards a more multipolar world economic order. This currency aims to provide a stable and less politically vulnerable alternative to the US dollar, which has been the centerpiece of global trade and finance. By decreasing their dependency on the dollar, the BRICS countries hope to shield themselves from the economic repercussions of US policies, including sanctions and financial market volatility. This move towards de-dollarization is driven by the need to assert economic sovereignty and mitigate risks associated with the current US-centric financial system. The ongoing development in the forum, via the various summits, truly shows dedication to the agenda. The dialogue surrounding a common currency, along with strategies for economic cooperation and putting intra-BRICS financial transactions on a stronger footing, signals concerted action aimed at installing an alternative economic framework. This movement is not merely about making a new currency. It is substantially about changing the very rules of worldwide finance and trade to accommodate better the interests and realities of the economy's emerging portfolios. The successful launch of a BRICS currency could result in transformative global economic governance, perhaps leading to a more equitable share of power. This will engender not only economic stability and equity the world over, but also a tangible challenge to the current hegemony of the US dollar, providing the impetus to dissuade other regions from adopting pay service on similar pathways. In fact, much more than currency, de-dollarization is the buzzword emergent phenomenon, which can radically alter the landscape of economic engagement globally and aid in the emergence of a multipolar economic order. Just as the BRICS desire to alter the balance of monetary powers, the very cracks that BRICS is trying to bridge have begun to show in the very foundation of the system that BRICS aims to overtake. Economic consequences of US fiscal policies. The economic landscape of the United States is currently experiencing significant turbulence due to recent shifts in fiscal policies under the new administration. As reported, these changes have caused a considerable decline in consumer sentiment, with the University of Michigan's Index of Consumer Sentiment plummeting by 22% since December 2024. The index, a key indicator of financial confidence, shows a sharp decrease in consumer expectations, down by 26%, reflecting growing apprehensions about the economic future. This anxiety stems from rapid policy shifts, including fluctuating tariffs and uncertainties in international relations, notably affecting transatlantic alliances and causing market instability, which saw the S&P 500 index enter correction territory recently. In Europe, particularly in Germany, there has been a significant pivot in fiscal strategy in response to the evolving economic environment influenced by the US policy changes. The new German Chancellor announced a radical departure from traditional fiscal conservatism, exempting defense spending from the stringent debt brake and proposing a massive infrastructure fund to boost economic resilience. This shift is part of a broader European response to reduce dependency on external economic policies, especially from the US, and to fortify their own economic sovereignties. The global economy faces increasing stress, with global economic indicators and forecasts trending badly. The OECD, bedeviled by concerns of rising economic disintegration and a continued burden from inflation, has lowered its forecasts for global growth over the next year and a half. Furthermore, the new business growth decelerates, as indicated by the Global Purchasing Managers' Index, PMI, suggesting that a worldwide slowdown could become apparent in a declining trend for global economic activities. These are trends that speak to the contagious effects of US policy decisions on the working of global economic dynamics, influencing performances of markets and international economic strategies. The current state of economic affairs is further complicated by existing record amounts of economic policy uncertainty. This uncertainty originates from quick alterations in US fiscal policies with far-reaching consequences on global trade and economic stability. The current adjustments being made to fiscal and monetary policies worldwide are attempts to cushion against the ramifications of these uncertainties. However, whether or not these adjustments will bring the much-needed relief in the long term is itself an uncertain proposition fraught with possible repercussions of inflation and reduced economic growth around the world. This is evidence that modern economies are integrally linked and highly influenced by US policies across the globe. With the US economy facing uncertainty, another nation is laying down tracks toward a different vision of global leadership. The role of the Belt and Road Initiative. The Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, launched by China, is a significant geopolitical and economic strategy aimed at enhancing regional connectivity and embracing a brighter global economic future.
Spanning 8,000 kilometers on land and sea, they became a vibrant pathway for trade.
This ambitious project seeks to build trade routes resembling the ancient Silk Road, connecting Asia with Africa and Europe via land and maritime networks. The extensive infrastructure projects, including roads, railways, ports, and pipelines, facilitate easier trade and investment across the participating countries. This initiative not only boosts China's influence in these regions, but also offers potential economic growth and development for the partner countries. However, the BRI is not just about economic investments. It's also a tool for China to wield considerable geopolitical power. By investing in the infrastructure of developing countries, China secures strategic alliances and access to important resources and markets. The dual nature of these investments is both economic opportunities and instruments of diplomatic leverage. This strategic depth allows China to enhance its global standing and secure its interests abroad, particularly in areas where Western influence has been traditionally strong. There has been considerable backlash and reactions from international parties with regard to BRI, especially the great powers of the world, the United States and the European Union. Skepticism and a lot of apprehension reign in those quarters, especially surrounding China's growing influence. The BRI seems to legitimize, or worse, consolidate the argument for reshaping world order in favor of China and expanding its economic reach over continents. These events prompt more scrutiny and transparency on how BRI projects are executed and financed because of fears that they may involve debt trap diplomacy, in which recipient countries fall into unsustainable debts to Chinese financiers. Yet, the BRI grows, and its membership continues to add countries to the list. As some would put it, some allow joining the membership of countries that have diversified results, with some really benefiting much from infrastructure development, while most warn about the potential increase in dependency on China. The economic initiative has also morphed into a cultural and ideological means for China to brandish soft power in the world beyond its infrastructural and geopolitical dimensions. China, through Confucius Institutes, educational exchange programs, and media partnerships embedded in BRI agreements, shapes narratives and cultural attachments with participating countries. A study by the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in 2024 stated that since joining the BRI, countries such as Pakistan, Ethiopia, and Serbia have recorded a significant increase in Chinese language programming and diplomatic cultural exchanges. As Chinese President Xi Jinping said, people-to-people connectivity is the foundation of the Belt and Road, thereby emphasizing that the initiative encompasses more than mere concrete and steel. It's also the shaping of a community of shared destiny. Of course, that cultural outreach usually flies under the radar, but it would be indispensable for long-going influence, along with foreign public opinions, to be aligned toward Beijing's strategic ambitions and counter-Western narratives regarding so-called Chinese expansionism. The project keeps on developing, but remains one of the crucial aspects of China's foreign relations and economic agenda, probably implying its plan for role leadership in world affairs through connectivity and partnership in economics for the long run. With new roads of steel and concrete sprouting across continents, deeper within the earth are the minerals fueling the next front in economic dominion: rare earth minerals and geopolitical tensions. The contest over rare earth minerals between the United States and China highlights a critical aspect of global geopolitical tensions. Rare earth minerals, crucial for the production of high-tech devices, military equipment, and renewable energy technologies, are predominantly controlled by China. According to an Al Jazeera report by Erin Hale, China controls about 70% of rare earth production and 90% of their processing, positioning it as a dominant force in this critical sector. This control gives China significant leverage over global supply chains, particularly as these minerals are essential for a range of advanced technologies. The strategic implications of this dominance are profound, especially in the context of the ongoing trade tensions between the US and China. The US has attempted to reduce dependency on Chinese rare earths by seeking alternative sources, such as in Ukraine, but the challenge remains in processing these minerals, a capability that China holds the reins on. As Hale notes, even if the US secures alternative mining sources, the absence of sufficient processing facilities stateside makes complete disengagement from Chinese supplies impractical. Besides, over how China will use rare earths as tactics against the US in the trade war, the geopolitical tension has escalated. As retaliation against US tariffs, China has levied its own tariffs and now threatens restriction on rare earth exportation to America, the monster that nearly cripples the entire US economy, dependent on those materials for several sector operations. Such moves would just reiterate how rare earths are more than mere commodities of economics, but to be seen as tools of geopolitics. There are countries reconsidering their leverage on these critical supply chains at this time, and countries will also be motivated to develop their capacities or perhaps formulate new alliances for access to these critical resources. It speaks to a wider resource nationalism movement, wherein nations now begin wanting more diversified and secure destinations of critical minerals. The ongoing dynamic between the US and China over rare earths does not just showcase the present reality in international relations, but also paves the way for how nations take their strategic, economic, and security moves hassle. While militarism principle has made the geopolitical chessboard change with rare earth manipulation, much interest will now be on China's mastery of the situation over global command in supply chains to reshape the economic and strategic backdrops across countries. China's global supply chain dominance. China's strategic dominance in global supply chains significantly impacts global economics and geopolitics. It has expertly positioned itself as a central hub for the production and export of various products, from consumer goods to high-tech electronics. This centrality not only allows China to control the flow of myriad global markets, but also provides it leverage in geopolitical strategies, such as during economic tensions with the United States. By controlling key portions of global supply chains, especially in critical sectors like rare earth minerals and advanced manufacturing, China can exert substantial influence, impacting global pricing, availability, and trade practices. China's leverage in global supply chains allows it to use economic measures as tools in broader geopolitical contexts. This control is particularly evident in its ability to retaliate during trade disputes by manipulating the supply of essential components, which can disrupt production lines worldwide, exerting economic pressure without resorting to overt political or military actions. For instance, during heightened trade tensions with the US, China's strategic release or withholding of rare earth minerals highlighted its ability to impact global industries drastically, from electronics to defense. The Belt and Road Initiative of China is further embedding supply chain dominance to enhance global logistics networks and new trade routes. While reinforcing China's leadership role in the global economy, this increases economic dependence on the part of participating nations on Chinese goods and technology. The BRI thus serves to extend Chinese influence through inclusion of these nations into supply networks, with the effect of making it more difficult for nations to disassociate from reliance upon Chinese products. The dependence of world trade on exports from China places countries in situations of great vulnerability due to supply chain disruptions precipitated by various forms of strife, from political disputes to natural disasters and instabilities originating within China. Such dependency is thus twofold. While it serves to the economic advantage and provision of low-priced goods, it also comes with serious risks, leading to cascading effects across global markets. Realizing those dynamics would empower those nations to formulate their economic and strategic policies in a time when China's influence over global supply chains is ever growing. Recognizing and ameliorating these kinds of vulnerabilities will be indispensable to ensure global economic stability as supply chains continue to concentrate in China. China is engaging in technological innovation as much as it is controlling world trade, whilst also developing artificial intelligence and electric vehicles. China's technological advancements. China's technological advancements have significantly impacted the global stage. The nation has made leaps in various sectors, including artificial intelligence, AI, telecommunications, and electric vehicles, EVs, positioning itself as a global leader in innovation. This surge in technological capability is part of a broader strategy to move up the value chain and reduce reliance on importing high-tech products from the West. By developing indigenous technologies and fostering domestic industries, China not only bolsters its economic resilience, but also enhances its competitive edge in the global market. The rapid growth of China's AI sector is particularly notable, as Chinese firms have innovated around restrictions imposed by foreign governments, such as the US. These restrictions, aimed at curbing China's technological ascent, have instead spurred local companies to develop homegrown solutions that rival or even surpass their international counterparts. This development has had profound implications for global tech industries, reshaping competitive dynamics and pushing other nations to accelerate their own technological advancements to keep pace. Another area of focus is China's dominance in the EV market. The state is now the biggest market for electric vehicles, encouraged by active government policies supporting clean energy. Chinese companies like BYD have not just taken a significant share of the domestic market, but are also beginning to make an impact on the global stage. Their expansion is facilitated by the fact that China dominates the majority of the critical raw material supply chain for batteries like lithium and cobalt, and thus has an unrivaled advantage in EV production and export. In addition, China's technological strategies are entangled with its geopolitical ambitions, with the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, being an instance of such integration. The BRI in its full spirit means not only building infrastructure, but it also means exporting China's technological standards and practices to other parts of the world. Such an approach is to embed Chinese technology abroad, furthering its influence and establishing global standards that suit Chinese national interests. Technology exports, from high-speed rails to 5G networks, are the tools China is using to achieve its grand objective of transforming the global technological and economic landscape to its advantage. But perhaps most significantly, for India's enduring strides in technology, one such strategic activity is capital investment in education and human development for innovation. As a report dated 2023, published by the Ministry of Education notes, China annually produces more STEM graduates than any country on Earth, as it churned out over 4.7 million graduates in 2023 alone. This high flow of talent fills research and tech enterprises in the country and ensures a continuous inflow of research and innovation assets across multiple sectors. In Kai-Fu Lee's observation as a highly noted Chinese tech investor and AI guru, success in AI and substitute emerging technology in China is really about not only funding, but rather personal talent density and ability to deploy solutions at scale really quickly. In addition to formal education, the government of China launched other programs, obtaining sponsorship of top-tier researchers worldwide and encouraging domestic breakthroughs through such programs as Made in China 2025 and 1,000 Talents Plan. This long-term emphasis on developing a technology-savvy workforce has kept China's strength rolling in its charge as a serious tech power across the world. Even as China charges ahead with cutting-edge tech, an age-old asset is making a glittering comeback in the background. Future trends in the gold market. The future trends in the gold market are closely tied to broader economic and geopolitical shifts. The recent surge in gold prices is largely attributed to the instability in the global economic environment, including trade wars, currency fluctuations, and geopolitical tensions. As nations and investors seek stability, gold has regained its appeal as a safe haven asset. This trend is particularly evident as gold prices have soared from around $1,800 to nearly $3,000 per ounce in a short period. This price movement reflects growing concerns over inflation and the debasement of fiat currencies, particularly the US dollar, amid expansive fiscal policies and mounting public debt. Various global events, including sanctions and the realignment of economic alliances, influence gold's role as a financial asset. As the US continues to leverage its currency and financial systems to exert international influence, countries and central banks are increasingly looking at gold as an alternative to diversify their reserves away from the US dollar. This shift is particularly pronounced in countries like China and Russia, which are actively increasing their gold reserves as a strategic move to bolster their economic sovereignty and reduce dependency on the US-dominated global financial system. The ever-evolving technologies in the ore mining industry and gold processing would probably strengthen the supply of future demands. New developments in mining technologies that render the gold extraction processes more efficient and environment-friendly will be of great importance as the sector keeps balancing profitability with environmental and social accountability. Much of gold mining is energy-intensive and often in ecologically sensitive areas, so these technological improvements mitigate the environmental impacts and regulatory and community issues that will be faced. On the other hand, continued bullish prospects of the gold market have been forecast for macroeconomic factors and increased global industrial demand for gold within technology and manufacturing. Unique properties of gold render it very valuable, not only to electronics and high-technology equipment, but also, for example, to magically transform an ordinary metallic element into God's golden metal idol. The more the globe digitizes and adopts higher forms of technology, the stronger the demand for gold will grow, hence affecting its price dynamics and investment attractiveness in the coming years. Thanks for watching. If you found this video informative, don't forget to hit that like button and leave us a comment with your thoughts. Subscribe for more insights and make sure to watch the next video popping up on your screen to stay updated. Join our community to keep the conversation going.